Members of the Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Throughout history, we have found many ways to organize and structure our societies. For although we are all individuals, we must live with other people as well. To function and survive, to ensure social order and security for all, every society requires some form of political organization, a system of leadership, authority, and cooperation. Political organization is an important aspect of every culture, and it is often accompanied by pomp, ceremony, and symbols of authority and unity. There are several distinct kinds of political organization. Some date back thousands of years and still flourish. Others are much more recent, but all are uniquely suited to the size of the group, its environment, and the culture of its members. One of the most common forms of political organization is the tribe. The Mendi are a tribal people. Until a chance encounter with two Australians in 1950, they were unknown to the rest of the world, walled off in a remote valley high in the mountains of New Guinea. Today, the Mendi still continue to follow their traditional way of life, and the existence of an outside world is not of much interest to them. But to anthropologists, the discovery of the Mendi has been of tremendous importance. The Mendi represent the largest and most flourishing tribal group to be discovered in recent times. 50,000 people, some 600 clans, speaking the same language, living on food from their garden patches, warring among themselves, all in a region scarcely 30 miles by 50. And since the Mendi are a tribe virtually unchanged by outside contact, they provide a living laboratory for the study of tribal political organization. Like many tribal people, the Mendi are horticulturalists. Their staple diet is the sweet potato, grown in cliffside gardens. The women are the farmers here, going out early to the potato patches, working most days until mid-afternoon. The men take no part in gardening except to clear land for new gardens when the old land is exhausted, and to make the magic that ensures good crops. The Mendi are grouped into smaller groups called clans, which may number 100 or more individuals. Each clan member is believed descended from a common ancestor. Their clans and kinship ties provide the sole basis for Mendi political organization. In a Mendi clan, the sexes live apart, the men in a clubhouse built on a high vantage point. the women in smaller houses scattered through the gardens. A man may have as many as 9 wives, though few have more than 2 or 3. The Mendi economic system is based largely on the ceremonial exchange of seashells, pigs, and other goods. It involves a complex protocol of loans and debts which serves to cement personal and clan alliances and establishes both personal and clan status. This is a dispute over bride price. It is also a very serious political negotiation, since indebtedness carries with it a tremendous sense of personal obligation. Through many such negotiations, a shrewd Mendi can thus gain much support from his kinsmen and others, and so strengthen his own political power. Such a man is known as a big man. And although tribal leadership tends to be informal, a big man will have more influence than others. He may represent his clan in its dealings with other clans and be called upon to help settle disputes among clan members. Because his authority is limited, however, some other means of unifying and bringing together the clans is essential. This is often achieved through groups that cross clan boundaries, such as age groups or common interest groups. They help to integrate the many members of the different clans. The most important of these groups are the spirit cults. The Mendi world is thick with hostile ghosts, spirits, and demons, which can destroy crops and animals and cause illness and misfortune. The spirit cults possess the magical anti-ghost strategies by which groups of clans can trap the ghosts and keep them from their mischief. But a cult wears out in time and loses its effectiveness. The ghosts catch on to the Mendi's magical tricks, and a new cult must be created. The transition from an old spirit cult to a new one is an important event for the Mendi, marked by a great celebration. And the celebration will serve more than one function. Many of the clans will be brought together. Marriages will be arranged. New clan alliances will be formed. And the unity of the Mendi tribe will be strengthened. From all over the region, clans arrive for the celebrations. The ritual will take 3 days. This is the cult house. For 7 years, the ghosts have been trapped inside it. Soon it will be time to drive them out. The young warriors of the different clans are in ceremonial dress. It's a chance for the young men to show themselves off and to look over the young women of the other clans. one will get much sleep. The next morning, the final ceremony begins. The cult will be ended, the spirits driven out of the cult house. There are 500 men and boys marching and 1,000 spectators, altogether representing perhaps a dozen Mendi clans. It is done. The cult is over. Soon a new one will begin. New interclan alliances will be forged, and the tribal organization of the Mendi will continue as it has for thousands of years. Until about 10,000 years ago, a simpler way of life prevailed. People lived in small independent groups known as bands, hunting and gathering, taking their sustenance from what the land gave them. They did not own property or territory and had no formal ranking or status. Apart from age and sex distinctions, everyone was equal. Even food was distributed equally. In such an egalitarian world, there was no real need for formal political leadership or organization. So there was none. There are still people today who practice this oldest and simplest form of political organization. In the Kalahari Desert of southwestern Africa live the Kung. The Kung are nomadic, living in temporary camps, following the game and seeking the wild plants that provide their food. During the day, the women peck and tug at the land for the roots, nuts, and berries which make up the bulk of the Kung diet. Occasionally, the land becomes hard and dry, and the reward meager. Hunting is the work of men, and it is their passion. In camp, they spend their time making new weapons and preparing the poison coating for their arrows. As they work, they talk among themselves, reminiscing of hunts that have gone before and planning for hunts yet to come. The band numbers at most a few dozen people, nearly all related in one way or another. If food is plentiful, the band may be larger. But if food is scarce, or if there are personal differences between members, the band will split up, and the different members will go their own ways, joining other bands in which they have relatives. This is Koma, the head man, the informal leader of this band. He has no real authority. Decisions are made by consensus. But because Koma is a good hunter and a respected elder, his words may carry a bit more weight, and the other men will often come to him for advice. Among the Kung, age brings with it a great measure of respect. And even in this egalitarian society, elders do have certain roles and privileges denied to younger men and women. When the hunters return with fresh meat, it is the elders who divide and distribute it. For most of human history, most of us lived in much the same way. It was only relatively recently, as food production led to a more settled way of life, that the first tribes appeared. As time passed, some of those tribes became more complex. Their communities grew in size and density, and food production became more intensive. Of necessity, these societies moved away from the informal and decentralized leadership of bands and tribes. There was now a need instead for formal systems of leadership and organization. So gradually, some of these societies became very centralized, often with a single hereditary leader, a paramount chief who delegated authority to his relatives. Anthropologists call these societies chiefdoms. These are the Bella, a chiefdom that still thrives today in Liberia. This man is a close relative of the Bella's paramount chief, and he functions as a local official, a village chief. Indeed, every Bella man measures his status by his degree of kinship to the paramount chief. The common people are farmers living in simple houses with thatched roofs. But the chiefs, of which there are several levels, own cattle and live in concrete houses with tin roofs. A chief will often foresee the redistribution of goods. If a farmer's crops fail, the chief will see to it that the man receives food from his neighbor's fields. The chief's authority is based primarily on his ability to persuade and upon his people's willingness to listen and accept his rule. Chiefdoms work well in many societies, but they weren't sufficient when the size and diversity of some societies expanded. Beginning about 5,000 years ago, nearly simultaneously and as a result of intensified food production, a new form of political organization appeared in Asia, the Middle East, and later in the New World. They were political systems based on the concept of a state, and they were different from all that had gone before. They had a permanent government with centralized power, a formal code of law, and the authority to use coercion to enforce that law. The people were divided into classes. There was an unequal distribution of wealth, and a degree of specialization of labor not found with any other form of political organization. These nation-states relied on agriculture. These aqueducts were but a small part of the extensive agricultural system developed by the Romans. The result of this intensive farming and food production was that society was guaranteed an abundance of food, a surplus. And it was the management of this surplus that was in large part the basis of the state's power, the source of its legitimacy. Legitimacy is, very simply, the right of a state to hold and use its power, and it is based upon the consent of the governed. In many societies, legitimacy is based on religion, and in some states, called theocracies, religion and politics are so deeply interwoven that they are indistinguishable. July 1979, Ladakh, a province on the Tibetan border in northern India, the site of a fascinating example of a living theocracy. Pilgrims have traveled from all over the Himalayas to celebrate the 800th anniversary of the Drikung order of Tibetan Buddhism. They have also come to pay homage to one man, Chetsong Rinpoche, a lama who 4 years earlier had escaped from a Chinese labor camp in Tibet. Rinpoche's story began in 1950 in Tibet. At the age of 4, he was recognized by abbots of the Drikung order as the reincarnation of their spiritual and political master. 6 months later, the little boy was ordained as Drikung Chetsang Rinpoche, the Precious One. At the time of Rinpoche's investiture, Tibet was a living theocracy, a country where there was no tangible separation between church and state. The Buddhist monastery system performed all normal state functions. The Drikung order was a major subsect within this theocracy. Yet, even as Rinpoche's investiture was taking place, the People's Republic of China was beginning its infiltration of Tibet. By 1959, the entire country was occupied by the People's Liberation Army, and 12 centuries of Buddhist theocracy and culture came to an end. Chetsang Rinpoche was imprisoned. In 1977, 2 years after his escape from Tibet, Rinpoche came to Ladakh, there to reestablish a complete theocratic hierarchy. He was rebuilding the theocracy of Tibet within the framework of the modern state of India. Two years later, the success of Rinpoche's efforts was evident. Pilgrims came by the thousands to celebrate the 800th anniversary of the Drikung order. To commemorate the occasion, a huge tapestry was prepared. It marked the rebirth of an ancient theocratic tradition, and for the Buddhists of Ladakh, it was a moving experience. On the last day of the celebration, Rinpoche led an open prayer attended by 500 monks and 7,000 pilgrims. While Drikung theocracy has been revitalized, it is undergoing cultural translation in Ladakh. Whether Rinpoche's tiny theocracy can survive and prosper in the shadow of modern India and China is still uncertain. Indeed, throughout the world, small political organizations like the Drikung theocracy, or for that matter, the Mendi tribe, or the Kung bands, are rapidly disappearing as larger nation-states take over smaller political units. These are modern state systems with their bureaucracies, economies, institutions, legislatures, courts, and armies. They have much greater power than smaller and less formal political systems. Some anthropologists believe that this trend towards consolidation is accelerating and that it will lead eventually to a single political unit, a unified world government. Indeed, there have already been some faltering steps in that direction. But other anthropologists feel that the trend toward consolidation is reversing. In Africa, for example, imposition of national governments with laws and borders arbitrarily set by Europeans has met with little success and has been challenged, often violently, by tribal peoples determined to retain their traditional cultures and local political organization. Whether at the world or local level, to succeed, political organizations must provide for the richness and diversity of human adaptations and the many faces of culture.